You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to helping everyday men build legendary relationships with yourself, your partner, and your world. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is simple: to help you navigate life with more clarity, more confidence, and purpose-driven action, with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and some loving straight talk. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Legends podcast. I am your host, Mike Campbell, and today I've got a solo episode for you that is going to cover men's mental health. So that's a big topic. It's kind of a bit of a popular topic now too. What I want to do today is I want to kind of break down what I see happening. You know, it is now, upon this release, November. November is also sometimes, depending on your circles and sphere of influence, known as MOvember. MOvember is widely known as associated with men's health, men's mental health. So I want to explore this, and I want to explore, like, what do we do when it comes to the idea of Movember, but men's mental health? What are we doing? Is it working? And kind of break a few things down and offer a few ideas and a few, what I think are pragmatic actions and solutions. But before we do that, as always, welcome to the show. If you're new here, hi, great to have you here. Reach out. I'd love to know that you're listening to the show. Feel free to tag me, please, on social media, on Instagram. Let me know that you're listening to this or watching the video, perhaps you can find on YouTube. We generally get that up there. Please take note of the points in here that really land for you. And then my invitation to you is to ask yourself afterwards, how am I going to implement that into my life? I can already suggest that one of the areas and one of the ways that we can implement this is by to then take it to conversation, to be in conversation with these things with someone else. That helps us anchor it, and that helps us therefore start to be more curious about how I can implement that and put it into action in my life. And so the extension of that is, hey, if this lands for you, please share it with another guy that you think will benefit from it. I mean, this whole subject is about men, supporting men in building legendary relationships with yourself, your partner, and your world. And certainly this topic around men's mental health. Where you get your podcasts, like, subscribe, download, and it would do me a massive solid if you would pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and a review. Helps us get this in front of more men that could need it, benefit from it, and just enjoy it. And also men that might want to ask their own questions of me and hear me speak to some things. Love doing Q&As for you guys. And this topic really has kind of come about in part from a question and lots of questions, really. And I have a beard all the time, but it is currently October and November is coming up. And I've been, I suppose what you could say loosely, in the men's mental health space for some time, which is to say, like, I work with men. And so I think some people can think that I work in men's mental health. I don't consider that I do, because of what we term that mental health thing, what we make it mean. I work with men in supporting their emotional and mental well-being, and perhaps beyond that, their mental and emotional performance in life. Movember is a phenomenal organization, and I've had some association with them in the past. I've also grown a mustache. And so the question for me that comes to me is, are you going to grow a mustache? Are you going to support Movember? And we also have other organizations, there's the Are You OK Day. We see things floating around the internet every now and then, like push-ups, for awareness of PTSD and depression and suicide and so on. But let's go to Movember to start with, because it's around the corner / it's here now, depending on when you're listening to this. Maybe it's in the past. And I have grown a mustache before, pretty fucking good mustache, if I do say so myself. I'll get that into the show notes. My wife, I mean, she hated it, but it's fun, isn't it, to grow a mustache for some guys? Well, for some who can, some guys still can't grow one, and that's maybe a bit of anxiety and a frustration. But here's the point that I want to start with when it comes to MOvember and these organizations, not the organizations, the idea behind them. MOvember has a mission, which I'm sure has evolved over time. Right now, if you go to the website, you'll see a few things. One of them that struck me and stuck out was, by 2030, we aim to reduce the number of men dying prematurely by 25%. So they are focused on prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and men's mental health, seeing those things as ways in which men die prematurely. They have a bunch of amazing information and statistics and resources as well on their website. But here's the thing. If you're a dude who's growing a mustache for MOvember, because, you know, it's MOvember, so you get to grow a mustache. That's the excuse. Now I can grow a mustache because you think it looks cool. You want the kudos for perhaps what you can grow. It's a bit of a joke mustache. Hey, you can do that any old fucking time. The point in MOvember is to raise awareness and funds so that MOvember can do the work they do in preventing men dying prematurely. Using the month of November and the movement of MOvember as a crutch to grow a mustache just because you want to look sick and have a funny mustache is a bit of a dick move in my book. And I don't say that to shame, but as an invitation. Make it worthwhile. That's the point. And so for me, that brings a broader conversation to the surface, which is even growing a mustache and raising awareness for MOvember and men's mental health and men's health in general doesn't do a fucking thing if we don't then do something with that information. And so whilst mustache, what a fucking great idea, by the way, MOvember is, right? Don't you wish you thought of it? There's a mustache on your face, and yes, there's plenty of hipsters now that just grow mustaches anyway, but it's still somewhat of an obvious sign. Oh yeah, men's health, men's mental health, when a bunch of dudes walking around have mustaches going on. That can start a bit of an awareness piece, but awareness doesn't do anything, again, if we don't do anything with the information. And so one of the reasons that we have to have organizations like MOvember or Are You Okay, or the organization that I'm a huge part of, the MENtour, is because we have made it as a society abnormal for people, men in particular, to have quote unquote mental health issues, which is both wildly inaccurate and wholly misleading. Here's something that I know to be true. We all have shit. We all have demons and doubts and fears and stuff that we've been through and things that we shame in ourselves, that we've experienced shame for, that we judge ourselves for, that we fucking purified of judgment from others about. But the idea that we have perpetuated and continue to perpetuate, that you must be perfect, that you must have your shit fully together, squeaky clean, an absolute fucking all-star of life that has nothing wrong with him. That idea is what leads to more shit piled upon what we've perhaps already experienced, because we create these expectations of having to be this fucking superhero. These are the kind of things that lead to mental health challenges in men and things that come up at this time of year and this type of conversation, like the astronomical rates of suicide in men. In Australia alone, roughly speaking, it's about 8 people a day take their own lives, and roughly about 6 of those are men. We say roughly because obviously it's averaged out. Essentially around 75% of suicides are men. That's somewhat consistent across the globe. And so we have to look at that. And the simplest assessment of it is, well, men aren't talking. We're not opening up. We struggle to communicate about things we are struggling with. And so we suffer in silence. And I think that's fucking true. Very, very fucking true. It is more than that. And we're going to explore a little bit of that in this episode. But let's touch on that for a second. Why do we struggle to do that? And I can say something, there's a lot, but something very central to it is we are fucking terrified of being judged, of not being accepted, of being ostracized, of being rejected, of looking like we're wrong, being made to feel that we're wrong, being judged as wrong or weak or incapable. We have formed this idea of what a man, a good, strong, successful man needs to be, and also what he is not. And we learn messages, as humans, we learn messages that form the beliefs that we have about ourselves and the world around us, which form our behaviors. And if you've heard messages that speak to things like harden up, suck it up, don't cry, men don't cry, don't be a pussy, drink a cup of concrete. When we learn that to have an emotional experience is to be weak and to not be manly, we shut off that side of us. Or if we had perhaps a situation growing up where we had an emotional response and one of or both of our parents absolutely pandered to us and took our, quote unquote, took our emotions away, then we never learn to deal with that shit ourselves. It becomes other people's responsibility. There's different ways that this stuff plays out. But just telling men to harden up, to deal with it, to brush off challenges is not only naive and ignorant and irresponsible, it's fucking stupid. Humans have emotions. Men have emotions. We are human. What I am not saying, or perhaps I'll rephrase that, in this, I'm not saying that we need to deal with and quote unquote be emotional. We need to learn how to process and manage our emotions. We also, most definitely, need to learn what to deal with, how you cope with things, how to cope with things, when to have a thick skin, what a thick skin is. Not an armor that tries to ignore things, but is actually affected by them under the surface. But a thick skin is something that isn't impacted by those things. It's actual resilience. Resilience is taking on board and bouncing back, not deflecting on the surface, but the cracks, our insecurities, actually let those things in and they impact us deep down. Yet we present the facade that everything's okay because we see everyone else's facade that everything's okay. And we think, well, he doesn't have shit. No one's got shit. I need to, plus if they see my shit, they'll judge me for it, which piles on more shit. I need to make it look like I don't have shit and everything's okay. That right there is fucking with so many men. So here's something that I want to present as an option. The term mental health. I think for a long time, it's almost been synonymous with, mental illness, which is incorrect. And even saying that, mental illness is not a bad thing. It's a challenge that someone has. A physical illness doesn't make someone a bad person, doesn't make someone less than. It's something they're being challenged by that they need support with and to work on. Physical health is something that we have on a spectrum. Same with mental health. To say someone has physical health issues, well, I was going to say it's not to judge them, although we might be. And the same comes in when we talk about mental health. I invite you to think about your mental health as something that you have to a level. We can do things that impact negatively, and we can do things that impact it positively. But when we just create this term mental health and make it a bad thing or something that we need to talk about, or we simplify, and it's something that men often, the masculine, wants to do, is simplify to the point of black and white, all or nothings. And in my experience, it doesn't really work. So let me give you a little bit of an example here when it comes to the idea of mental health and exploring it on a spectrum and doing things that impact it positively and things that impact it perhaps negatively. So here's a couple of really fucking common things that I see in men. I've mentioned emotions already, so let's touch on them to start with. Gentlemen, if you try to, or if your aim is to control your emotions, because the controlling of anything, in an attempt to control it, it is controlling you. And that's the fear for a lot of men. I need to control my emotions or they will control me. No, those are poles apart. There's something in the middle. It's called understanding, exploring, feeling, processing. But if you try to control your emotions, if you stuff them away, if you ignore conflict in the hope that it will just go away, if you dismiss requests to communicate from your partner or perhaps from your soul, your soul is wanting to communicate with you. If you sweep issues under the rug, if you ignore things that clearly need addressing, or you lie to yourself, she'll be right, you are exhibiting detrimental and self-defeating mental health habits. Your mental health will suffer for this. Just like your physical health will suffer from doing outrageously dangerous things, living in a high-stress environment, not exercising, being sedentary, sitting down for long periods, for consistently through day to day, and having poor nutrition, being dehydrated or drinking shitty fluids, and amongst many other things, but to speak to some broad things. And so often at the center of the challenge for mental health with men is our understanding, our processing of emotions. And so for me, this is why I tend to use the term emotional literacy. And when we're talking about this, we're talking about, more realistically, men's mental and emotional well-being. And so one of the more common ways in which I see, and I think all the research shows, men negatively impact their mental health, their mental and emotional well-being, is through their poorly managed emotions. Well, as I said before, if you've had something shamed in you, made it wrong, we ignore it. If you haven't learned to process and manage and communicate around emotions, you are not skilled at it. That's the simple point. And anything that we ignore, that we push away, that we reject, that we dismiss, that we make bad, you're putting it in a box, in a dark box. And anything that we do that with weakens. It atrophies. When brought into the light a little bit, it's fucking terrified and it runs or it fights, it claws at you. This is a lot of men in our struggle for healthy mental health, in a healthy approach to managing our emotions, and a healthy approach to emotional literacy. And so organizations like MOvember have missions to help men's mental health. And one of the things at the far end of that spectrum is things like suicide. But then there's also things like anxiety and depression. And I think over time, as a society, we're doing a good job in normalizing those things and making it okay to experience those things. But in some of the work that I'm doing, and there's someone, for example, called, there's many people, but someone I've been listening to a lot at the moment called Francis Weller, his take on, as a psychotherapist, his take on depression, I think is fascinating. And I won't delve into that too much here. I'll invite you to go and check out some of his audio recordings yourself. But one of the ideas when it comes to depression is, if you think about the word itself, and often for a lot of men, what we're doing is we're actually depressing a big chunk of ourselves. We're depressing our emotional experiences. We talk about the idea of stuffing your emotions away. Well, that's kind of in terms of a visual, what I'm doing here is I have my hands kind of by my neck and I'm pushing down, right? We kind of have that actual analogy and visual and language that we use, stuffing our emotions away. It's the same thing as avoiding, ignoring, not dealing with, right? So perhaps we wouldn't be so depressed if we stop depressing our experience, depressing our authentic self, depressing our emotional experiences. Then we come into something like 2020. And, global pandemic, COVID, the testing nature of this year in general, and then the real situation that a lot of people find themselves in. When we don't look after our mental health, or perhaps I'll use the phrase that I just used, our mental and emotional well-being, when you don't have the tools to do so and the support, what happens somewhere is there is a consequence. And this is where I like to use physics a little bit when it comes to the idea of an emotional experience. If I have an emotional experience that I don't process, feel, get the message that it's sending me, and then learn from that, there's something stuck inside me. There's something stuck that hasn't gone full circle. And so this is where physics comes in. Every action must have an equal and opposite reaction. So if you think about emotional experience, if I don't process that and let it go through me and full circle, then there has to be a reaction somewhere. And this is what we see in men. There is an equal and opposite reaction inside ourselves or outside ourselves when we act in the emotion at someone, when we ineffectively, inappropriately, fly off the handle, blame, get defensiveness, right? A lot of these kind of outward expressions of anger and annoyance and rage and violence and really fucking unhealthy and messed up shit because someone isn't willing to take ownership of their own shit and their own emotions. Now, we're not able a lot of the time because we haven't learned it. But what's piled on top of that is we're not fucking willing to. These tools, resources, support are everywhere for men. This is what organizations like MOvember, like the MENtour, like Tomorrow Man, these organizations are everywhere that can support men. But what we cannot do when it comes to looking at men's mental health, men's mental and emotional well-being, is stay in a place where we are reactive to when there is a problem in front of us. Because that, for such a long time, is how men have looked after their physical health, their relationships, our mental and emotional health. When something goes wrong, I react to it and try and fix it. And that generally isn't serving us. When you pile on there a bunch of shame and stories and messages, as we said before, about how you shouldn't do that stuff, and it's fucking weak to speak to someone or have a therapist or have a conversation with your mate about what you're challenged by. Our job, our task, our aim must be, as a community, as individuals, as a society, to shift to the idea of proactive mental and emotional literacy. And so this is where I'd often use the term, and I invite this, and this, I'm not new in using this, the idea of building mental strength. All of a sudden it takes on a bit of a different tone, doesn't it? Because that there, mental strength, really is the ability to handle the demands of life, to accept, process, and manage our emotions so that we can best communicate with ourselves and live in relationship to others and with ourselves. What it is not is waiting until the horse is bolted, trying to do something drastic, or continuing to be in denial because, the mountain seems too big. It's way too big now. I just need to sweep it under the carpet, sweep it under the carpet, sweep it under the carpet. Here's an analogy. If you keep sweeping issues under the carpet, at some point it piles up. You're going to trip on that shit. This is what we do as men. We trip internally, damage to ourselves, hating on ourselves, or externally, others pay the price. Mental strength is developing the ability to own, manage, and understand your own shit. And so at some point, we have to locate our balls and do something that will benefit you and those around you. And if that means choosing to get past how you may be seen and judged by others, judged as weak, as not enough, as not capable, as a woman, as a pussy, as whatever language is in there for you, getting past the risk of being seen as someone who can't handle their shit because you spoke to someone or got some help, or admitted that all of the fucked up complexities of life and relationships and work and fucking 2020 are getting a bit too much to handle without a goddamn conversation. Then humble yourself for fuck's sake. Because what humility is knowing your limits, your capabilities, your ceilings, knowing when you reach them and when you need support around them and to step beyond them. Humility is not self-humiliation. That is a negative mental health behavior. Reactivity is a negative mental health behavior. But this is the cycle that we fall into. Things are fine. Fine being such a fucking bland word that it really speaks to some shit going on. But let's run with it for a moment. Things are fine until something bad happens, until some shit hits the fan, sprays, and then we get into that reactive state. And we call it some pain, some discomfort. The cycle here that I see for so many men, this reactive cycle, is that we get into some pain, some discomfort, some shit going on. Fucking rock bottom for a lot of men. And then we go and do something to try and get out of the pain. Pain is a big motivator to a point. To a point. Until we get out of pain. And then when we have nothing else, the behaviors that we were doing stop. The aim for us is to be proactive so that we are focusing on going towards something. Just getting out of pain will not get us towards having mental strength, building, developing, progressing in our mental and emotional literacy, being able to handle and navigate conflict with ease, with grace, with respect, with compassion for yourself and other people, being able to communicate with clarity and confidence, being able to handle shit when it comes your way, when you're throwing curveballs, navigate them, sit with it, feel the emotions, get the message it's sending you, process, learn, step forward, raise your intelligence, thicken your skin as you have the emotional response and realize, that's why that happened. Interesting. Does that warrant that next time? Maybe I don't need to give a shit about that thing anymore. Because the getting out of pain cycle, this is a simple way that I can relay this in an analogy. If you've ever had some kind of a niggly injury, let's call it, like an ankle injury or something, and you go to see a physiotherapist. Shout out to all my therapists who can probably resonate their frustration with this example. And they give you some treatment with the pain and the discomfort. They give you some exercises to do to get out of the pain and discomfort. And hopefully you go and do those exercises and their treatment works. My suspicion is a lot of people don't do the exercises. But you do the exercises, you do the treatment, you get out of pain. Then what happens? Do you keep doing the exercises? No, you fucking don't. Because you're out of pain now. There's no reason. There's no motivation. There's no purpose to doing the exercises. And that is the way men are with our mental health and our emotional well-being. We are reactive. We'll only do something when something goes wrong, when something is glaringly obvious that it's hitting us in the face. My invitation to you is, if we go back to this example, and it actually speaks to my physio, I present with an injury and he goes, great, we want to get you out of pain, but what do you want to be able to do again? You want to be able to run? You want to get back on the sports field and play some footy? That's what we're working towards. All of a sudden, I'm getting out of pain because that's where I was, and now I'm working towards something. I'm building my strength. That's what we get to do as men with our mental and emotional well-being. Growing a mustache is fucking great. Raise awareness, raise money, and work on your own mental and emotional well-being. Proactive emotional literacy. Because again, for a lot of men, understanding your emotions, emotional literacy is a new language. And as I said before, if you've never experienced something, if you've never worked on something, if you've shamed it and hid it away in a dark closet, it atrophies, it weakens. We need to, one, humble ourselves. This is going to take a while to build. I need to practice it and practice it and practice it. Learning a new language takes time. I need to immerse myself into the culture of it. I need to speak it every day. I need to have conversations with people around it, and I need to learn and educate myself. That's what this is. But this work is more than just getting men to speak about shit that we're struggling with. It's also about teaching men tools for emotional processing, for dealing with loneliness and judgment and failure and relationship breakdown, for not meeting our or others' unrealistic needs and expectations. We need to teach men tools for building actual resilience, for how to recognize the need for support, how to reach out to mates and partners and mentors and professionals. Because yes, if you need to speak to a professional about your mental and emotional well-being, because they're a skilled expert who has some tools and resources and capabilities and the space to support you, then do it. Simple. We need to be able to teach men how to get past all of our old shit that has us in a constant state of beating ourselves up, of setting high expectations, of thinking, but I should be further ahead in my life. I should be able to do this. I should be better. I should be more capable. And then, of course, we can't because we're going beyond our capabilities. And so we beat ourselves up for not being that good. So we set the expectations again and we get into that spin. I should be further ahead. That is crippling men. Pile on that you shouldn't be able to talk about things and it's weak to do this. And it just gets worse and worse. We need to be able to teach men that it's okay to be okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be normal and not the most successful person with the best and happiest life. To not have the biggest house or the greatest job or the biggest income or the most status or the largest constitution, the thickest mask and armor. It's okay to be in the muck. It's okay to be challenged, to be struggling and working through it with yourself, being supported because everyone has shit. Everyone is in the muck in some way, shape or form in their life. And gentlemen, everyone gets to be supported. So let's run through a few things to close us out on what we can actually do. And I've spoken about this before on previous podcasts and also some videos I've done on social media, but let's touch on it really quickly. Inviting men to speak is about permission and safety. But if it's a two-way conversation, both people have a part in that safety. Because we are so terrified of judgment, we need to feel safe that we won't be judged. So that starts with ourselves. Even if someone judges me and laughs at me for sharing something, can I accept that that doesn't mean anything about me and I'm okay? That wasn't the person to talk to. Maybe there's someone else for me to talk to. You've got to have these fucking conversations with yourself. Safety is something that we choose. And of course, someone else can play a part in. So that starts with honesty with self. Honesty with self is building a foundation of self-trust. Leaning into discomfort. Being okay with it. Showing yourself it's okay. Practicing it. Small, building upon it. Small, building upon it. Get help from people. Talk to people who you feel safe with. Ask them, hey, I want to talk to you about some stuff that I'm challenged by. I'm a bit unsure about it. In fact, I'm quite uncomfortable with it. I realize the need for me to feel safe to do so. Can you support me by making it safe for me to share? This is what that would look like. I just need you to listen, or it would help me if you had some solutions or some ideas, if you bounce back to me what you're hearing, if you're hearing something perhaps that I'm not seeing. You get to sit down and think about this stuff. You get to create safety with the environment, with how you go about it. Instead, we cripple ourselves in worst case scenario thinking and we spin in that like fucking masturbation. That's not being proactive. That's wallowing in over-analysis and rumination on worst case scenarios. But it's not even actually stipulating worst case scenario. It's just kind of allowing it to be this gray cloud that floats around like a fucking thunderstorm waiting to crack. If you're going to masturbate in worst case scenario thinking, brother, then sit the fuck down and actually detail what is the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that could happen? If I speak to my partner, if I go to a therapist, if I talk to my mate about that thing that I'm struggling with because I really want to be heard and seen and have his support. But here is my invitation and my challenge to you. If you're going to masturbate, I keep using that term for good reason. If you're going to detail worst case scenario thinking, you have to do yourself the service, the respect of also thinking about the best case scenario thinking. Because what I offer to you is this: worst case scenario thinking, worst case scenarios very rarely happen. The most likely result is way closer to the best case scenario. They support me, they hear me, they help me out. I feel lighter for having shared it and got that fucking baggage off my back that I've been dragging around. Or you also might get from someone, no, I don't think I can support you, man. This is too much for me. This is too deep. This is too challenging. I don't know what to do with your shit. Great. Then take it somewhere else. They were open and honest with you that they can't do it. People get to set their own boundaries too. Because if one of your mental and emotional pieces of shit that you drag around is, I don't want to burden people, then you're going to keep burdening yourself with that belief. Give people the opportunity to set their own boundaries. But you get to ask them before you dump on them, hey, can I share with you? Do you think you can support me? If it's a no, it's a no. Find someone who can. There are plenty of people that want to listen and support. Because men, we have this thing about loyalty that I think we have quite misconstrued. You can go back to episode 3 of this podcast and check out a whole podcast on that. But what we've made loyalty mean, by and large, is I'm fucking loyal to my mates and I'll help them out whatever they need me with, whatever they need me for. What it means is most men are waiting to support their mates, happy to support their mates. Your mates are waiting for you to chat with them, to open up, to share, to be seen. Not only do they want to help you, but it will probably help them realize, fuck, I can be real like this too. You get permission by giving it to yourself. And if you want to support your mates, you give them permission by going first. That is one of the other things that you can do. Lead by example. That doesn't mean unloading all of your shit. That doesn't mean throwing emotions into every conversation. That means being real, being honest, being authentic about your experiences and what you're going through. Making it normal for us to have real conversations below the surface and into the depths of real human experience. Because most of us want to have deep connections and deep relationships, and we are deep individuals, but we're terrified, and so we stay stuck on the surface. That won't work. That's not the recipe for real connection and real mental and emotional strength building. So then one of the other points there is being in conversation, communicating, and being in community. I swear by this. I see it in my own life. I see it in all the work that I do. All my programs, the Everyday Legends Academy, is all about the community. Like-minded men who might be very different on the surface, but like-minded in the sense that we have so much shit in common beneath the surface. Coming together in a safe, confidential environment, both that we set up, but also that they agree to, therefore they are complicit in, they are part owners of. And then just being able to work through our shit and talk and share and communicate and support each other and challenge each other and provide accountability, call each other to who we can become. There's so much power on that. And that is both individuals and a collective building mental and emotional resiliency and literacy. Then part of that, to that point of resilience, is about actually learning what to give a fuck about. Pulling back the curtains and investigating everything that affects you. Does this actually get to affect me? Am I giving way too much weight to this thing? My partner did this thing and I've been stewing on it for a week now. Maybe I could handle that more effectively. Maybe I don't need to give as much weight to that. Maybe I could address it in the moment instead of stewing on it for a day. Learning where to give your energy and your fucks to, building actual resilience, not fake, let things through my wounds and really affect me beneath the surface, but I present a facade of everything's okay. That's lying to yourself. watching where you give your energy. And then here's a couple of exercises that I have for you and a challenge that I want to end this on. 1, journal. Be in conversation with yourself. Write it down. Get shit out of your head and down on paper. So here's a really simple exercise that I get every one of my clients to do, and I invite you to do, and it is this. A simple journal exercise. It needs to take 2 minutes. It can take 20 or longer if you want. Mentally, how am I feeling right now in this moment? Write it down. Emotionally, how am I feeling right now in this moment? Write it down. Physically, how am I feeling right now in this moment? And write it down. And then if you want to add to that, from the day, mentally, what else was I feeling? Emotionally, what else was I feeling? Physically, what else was I feeling? If this is new to you, then it might feel awkward and clunky and fucking confusing. What mental and emotional, what's the difference there? Emotionally, I feel good. So a little bit on that. Mental, think in your head. I feel clear, I feel distracted, I feel busy, I feel pulled and stretched and challenged. Emotionally, what actual emotions? What are you feeling? What are your feelings? I feel sad, happy, anxious, excited, concerned. And beyond that, some language that might support you, because we can feel many things at once. We can feel conflicting things at once. Part of me is feeling anxious. Part of me is feeling happy. Part of me is feeling loved. Emotionally, I am feeling good is not an answer. Good doesn't tell us anything. It's not an emotion. Good, you can write it down. It is an invitation to inquire deeper. What am I actually feeling right now? If you're really struggling with it, you might go, mentally, I'm feeling confused. And as a result of that, emotionally, that makes me feel fill in the blank. Practice, build a routine, set the expectation for yourself that you're going to do it for a month. Then check in and see what you're learning about yourself. And physically, it's the same thing. Physically, good is not an answer. What are you physically feeling in your body? Right now, my body, I feel cool. I can feel the air conditioning. I feel energized. I feel like I need a drink of water. I've been talking for a little while. That's what I'm feeling physically. Do that for a month. Let me know how you go. Check in with me. And then here's a challenge I have for you. Speaking to the challenges that we have out there for mental health, 1, growing a mustache, cool. 25 push-ups, all this kind of stuff. I want you to do a challenge that's going to actually fucking do something for your mental and emotional well-being. That's going to challenge you, that's going to invite you to understand yourself and grow. And so my challenge is every day for a month, sit down and be with yourself for 25 minutes. No phone, no music, no nothing. A pen, a writing device, and a pad of paper. That's all you can have. Write stuff down. Guess what? If you've never done anything like this before, and this isn't meditation either, this is simply being with yourself. Notice the thoughts and feelings that come up. Write some things down if you want. Be okay that some of that shit might be wildly uncomfortable. And you might want to justify the hell out of it and go, this shit, I've done this. This is not doing anything. This is too daunting. Oh, I've got to do something else. Oh, those other things have come up. Oh, I should probably go do that task. Oh, my phone went off. Sit the fuck down and be with yourself for 25 minutes. Is that really that hard? But you've got to be okay with what comes up. Let it be like the weather. Clouds that come and go. That doesn't mean you are that emotion or that thought, but they pass through you. Notice it and pay attention. What can I learn about myself, for myself, to process, to go through, to understand better, to grow to the other side of? For me, that is proactive mental and emotional strength building. That's what we get to do when we think about men's mental health. That's what I have for you on this podcast. Please make this shit go viral. Grow a mustache if you want, but be proactive and pragmatic about your mental and emotional well-being and that of the men in your life. And go raise some money for a foundation that's doing important work if you want. And have conversations with others. Share your shit. Lead. Go first. And make it safe for yourself to be seen and give permission for others to do the same. Make it safe for them. And with that, make it normal and okay for men to have shit, to recognize their shit, and to do something about it, rather than shame it and stuff it away. Because remember, when we stuff it away, we depress it, and it will atrophy. It will die. That part of ourselves, you'll lose that skill. Make MOvember. Make your approach to mental health be one of both building yours and supporting others in building theirs. Mental and emotional literacy. That's everything I've got for this podcast. I hope this lands for you. If you've got something from that, please reach out to me. Let me know. Tag me on social media. Please share this. My challenge, 2 men who you think would benefit from this podcast. As always, where you find your podcast, like, subscribe, click download. Again, I would love it if you'd leave us a rating and a review. Remember, as always, do something with this information and keep building that legendary integrity. You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show dedicated to helping everyday men build legendary relationships with yourself, with your partners, and in your world. If you have got something from this podcast, please share it with someone that you think could benefit from it. And please visit your home for podcasts. Like us, subscribe to us, leave us a review. Your feedback is phenomenal in getting this in front of more eyes and ears. Until next time, I'm Mike Campbell, and remember to build that legendary integrity.